Hawaiian Shorts are designed to show you a new technology in one video. In this video, we can have a look at the new HTTP file that will help you with your web APIs. For this example, I'm going to use an existing web API I've created in another series of videos that are available on YouTube. They're all to do with the sports management system, the SMS that you can see here, and I'll post a link in the description to that web API series if you'd like to see how that was built. But you can use any web API, but that's the one I'm going to use in this example. And if I just fire it up so you can see what it looks like, you can see that it has a Swagger page that I've included, and it allows us to add, for our sports management system, fixtures that the sports club can play, players that belong to that sports club, and availability, which is saying a player is available for a particular fixture. In this example, I think this is using an in-memory database, but that's an implementation detail that isn't important for this video. So at the moment, how you would test this out is there's several ways you could test out your web API. One I'm showing you on the screen at the moment is if you include the Swagger NuGet packages, you can build a UI that will let you test your API via a web user interface, this one. So for example, if we go to fixtures and we have a look at the get endpoint, it has this button here that says try out, and we can hit execute, and we can scroll down and you can see that we get a list of fixtures come back with the 200 response. So this is one way we can test out our endpoints, and we can test out all the various ones. So we can delete an endpoint, we can post a brand new fixture, we can get one particular fixture. So again, if I go try out and I select one, we get a 200 requests, but we only get one fixture that's returned back in the payload, in this example Southampton Football Club. So this is one way we can test our web API. Another way we can test it is we could create a consuming dummy application that would basically make requests to our web API. And another way we can do it is we can download a third-party tool such as Postman. So if I again lift this address out that we've got here, copy it into my clipboard and fire up Postman that I've got installed on my machine. Postman again allows us to make requests, so I want to make a get request, and I just paste the URL endpoint into here and I go send, and we get the same result here, and we also get told that it was a 200 and how long it took. Postman, it gives us the advantage as well of being able to write tests, so we can assert what we're expecting. Another example of this is also a tool called Insomnia that does a very similar sort of thing. However, all these things involve us moving out of our development environment. So in this video I'm going to show you a new feature that's now available in Visual Studio 2022. So let's go back to Visual Studio, and first of all I'm going to stop the application, and I'm just going to check within my SMS project what version of Visual Studio I'm on at the time of recording this. So if I go help about, you will see that I'm on Visual Studio 2022 Community Edition version 17.6.2. So wouldn't it be nice if we could actually test our endpoints within Visual Studio? This is something you've been able to do in VS Code for a while through a REST client extension. And this new feature that Microsoft has added to Visual Studio is sort of simulating that behaviour, even though it's implemented off a different code base. So what I'm going to do is within the project, so I'm going to create a new folder. And this folder I'm going to just call docs, will do in this case. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new HTTP file. And this HTTP file, normally how you would structure these is you would probably have one HTTP file for each of your endpoints, or in this instance each of our controllers. So I've got a fixtures controller that has all the various actions that you can do with the fixture, a player's controller for all the actions you can do with the player, and an availability controller for all the actions you can do for player stroke fixture availability. So for our example, I'm just going to create a new fixture HTTP file. So within the docs folder, I'm going to right click, go add, new item, and then what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to type search for HTTP, and this is the new file type that now gets included with Visual Studio. So I'm going to pick this one and I'm going to name it the same as the controller. So I'm going to call this fixture. So this HTTP file will allow us to write a series of endpoint calls to all the bits that relate to our fixture controller. So we go fixture.http and go add. And this is the screen that you get. And if you go off to this address, it will give you some more information on how you use this, but I'm going to demo the basics of how you use this already. So let's just open this just so you can see what it looks like. And using .http files within Visual Studio 2022. So what we can do with this is we'll fire up our web API again, because it needs to be running, and I'm going to use my local host version, but you could use any version of web API, which I'll also demonstrate in this video. And the reason we want to fire this up is we are interested in the endpoint. So let's just first of all try out a Swagger one again. So we'll go to fixtures and we'll just run getting all fixtures with try out, execute, and you can see that this is run again, but the bit we're interested in is this address. So we just copy this and then we go back to our code. We can remove this comment, and what we can do is we can do a get just like this. So we're saying get, and then we run the actual endpoint URL, and you can see alongside this now we get a little triangle. So at this point we can press this triangle and we can execute the call to the endpoint directly in Visual Studio without leaving the editor, and you can see we get exactly the same payload come back. We also get told that the status was 200, that it was successful, and we get the JSON object as before. So that's rather nice. What we can do is, if we've got several commands in here, is we can create a variable. So on a new line up here we can say, and variables within this file begin with an @ so we can say @URL and we copy the bit that is always common. So we'll take it up to there, go cut, and paste that into there like so. And then in order to include this variable in each of our calls, we need double curly brace, and then the name of the variable, double curly brace again. And you can see now that this will work exactly the same, and we get the information pop up here. So what's nice about this HTTP file is it is a file like any other file in your project, which means you can save it and check it back into source control, which makes it useful for other people in your team to see how you call your various endpoints and the sort of shape of the data that it returns back or you can send to it. So in order to move on to the next endpoint, another one is that we get fixture by ID. So in order to make another call, we need to separate out the calls by using 3 hashes. And then we can do another call. So we can go get, then we can use the curly braces again, URL, and this is a fixture. And then it takes a parameter. So again, we could have a parameter placed up here and pass in, but we're saying give me back fixture 1 in this instance. And you can see each time we make a call, we can run these independently. So I get another triangle. If I just run this one, there we go, we get Southampton back. Or we could swap it out and have a variable. Call this fixture ID. And we just say that equals 1, and then on here we can just go and that will still work as before, and we can just swap it out as we see fit, and then the data changes, and again we're still getting the status code and we're still getting the payload back. So that's good. We can also perform a delete or a put or a post. We can do any of the verbs within this file. So let's have a go at doing a delete this time. So a delete. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop this just so I can see the structure of how these get called. Let's open up the fixtures controller and find the delete. There's the put. There's the delete. So again, the delete is going to be /fixture /ID. So we can go back to our file and we can say delete. Again, we can pass in the common part of the URL as before. It's still going to the fixture endpoint, and this time we can say, again, we can just pass in the ID, which we can either use the variable or we can hard code it. So I'll just say I want to delete fixture ID 2 in this instance, and you can see that this has a triangle by it, and you can see that when we run this, oh, I haven't got the actual site running, so that's not going to work. There we go. Let's just fire up that again. And this time if we go, that's why we get a bad gateway, but this time if we rerun it, we get a 204, and we can check that it's gone by running the get all fixtures part, and you can see that ID2 has now disappeared. So all the other HTTP verbs work in exactly the same way. So for example, if you wanted to post a fixture in via the endpoint, again we use 3 hashes. We use the correct verb, post, then we use the endpoint, so we can use the double curly braces, which in this case is /fixture. The only bit that is different is that we now need to supply a header that has the content type, which is application JSON. So we do that there, and then we also then supply a sample body. So if we just have a look at the Swagger, just to help us out with that. So for example, this sample body, like that, and then we can then post like we do all the others by hitting the triangle. I'm not going to post this because I don't want to put dummy data into this particular version of my SMS system, but it's exactly the same. It just needs a content type, and the actual body that you want to post up to the other end would work exactly the same with a put. So again, URL, then /fixture, and I think the fixture takes an ID. So we could just say update 1, please. That would still need the content type of application /JSON, and then it would need the payload, which would be much the same as before. Slightly different payload probably, but again you see we get the triangle, and again I don't want to update any of my existing data. But you would get what happens here, which I think is a 204 status. So all very simple, and then you can save all of this, and then this can get checked in like any other file, and then someone else who checks it out can see how the sort of endpoints work, and they can play about with the endpoints all within Visual Studio without needing Swagger or Postman or any other tool like that. So that's quite useful for your own endpoints, but you can also use it with third-party endpoints that you haven't developed yourself, just to try them out to see how they work. So let me just show you that. So back over here, yeah, so we can also try it out with endpoints that we haven't created, third-party endpoints. So I've had a look up for free RESTful web APIs, and I found this one that is to do with cats. So you can call this cats random fact, and you can go execute, and when you do that you get a random fact about a cat. So we can try this out just to see how this works. So what we're interested in is the overall URL again. So let's lift that, and let's create a new HTTP file back in Visual Studio. So under Docs, right click, add new item, and HTTP, and we'll call this cats. So we haven't created this API at all, we know nothing about it really other than the Swagger documentation if it's got some. And we go add, and we can just do a simple get call to that, and we can run it and see what we get. And there we go, we get an OK 200 status, and we get all these other bits of information, and we actually get the content there. And we could run this again, and because it's random we'll get a different piece of content, and so on. So this is quite useful for playing about and learning how a third-party API works. And again, we can save this and other people can reuse it. So that's all I really want to say about the new HTTP file. Quite a useful little extension. Like I said, it's already existed in VS Code as an extension already, called REST client, I think it's called. And there's also an equivalent in the Rider IDE as well. Now, one thing to note at the time of recording, the new template HTTP file that packages with Visual Studio is incompatible with the one that's in Rider. So at the time of writing, I think both JetBrains and Microsoft are trying to resolve that issue. So that's just a gotcha that you should be aware of. So that's the end of this video. I'm the Hawaiian Shirt Coder, and remember, keep learning, keep exploring, keep developing, and I'll see you next time.